Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified. Today we are going to discuss some important articles from the Indian Express which appeared during the last week and important articles from the Sunday edition of The Hindu. The topics for today's discussion are mentioned over your screen. So let's begin our session. So the first news article for today is based on this particular news which appeared on the Indian Express on 5th April. The news article says that Skyroot, which is a private startup, test fired 3D printed cryogenic engine. So based on this news article, we are going to discuss two important topics. The first topic would be 3D printing or additive manufacturing. So 3D printing is important for our GS paper 3 under the section Science and Technology. And based on this news article, we are going to discuss another important topic, that is commercialization of Indian space sector. As we can see from this news article, that is Skyroot, which is a private startup. It is a big feat for this startup to test fire a 3D printed cryogenic engine. And this is possible through the recent reforms by opening up the Indian space sector for private firms. And this topic is important under the section Awareness in the Field of Space. So UPSC in the previous year 2018 in the prelims examination had asked this particular question regarding the applications of 3D printing. Also in the year 2013 in the mains examination we found this question which was about how does the 3D printing technology work and list out the advantages and disadvantages of this technology. So our course of discussion would be what is 3D printing technology, how does this technology works, what are the advantages of this technology and the potential applications of this technology. Then we will discuss the disadvantages and the challenges in 3D manufacturing. Also, we will discuss national strategy for additive manufacturing in India. At the end of this discussion, you will be in the position to answer these two questions. Additive manufacturing, by its name, implies adding down of successive layers of materials. So 3D printing in the layman terms means using computer-aided designs to make prototypes or working models of objects. And this is done by laying down successive layers of materials. And some commonly used materials are plastic, thermoplastic, resin, metal, fiber and ceramic. So how does this technology work? There are some steps. The first step is modeling. So in this step, the blueprint or the design of the object which we want to print is created using a modeling software. The second step is known as slicing. Here, the 3D printer scans the design and then slices it into sections to help the printer understand the shape of this design. And finally, the third step is 3D printing, wherein the design is created by laying down successive layers of materials. So this is the working of 3D printing. 3D printing has various advantages over the traditional manufacturing processes. The first advantage is that the process is highly efficient. The objects can be created in a fraction of time with less production cost. Hence, the process reduces the production cost and also saves time. Another advantage is that it boosts innovation as it can enable new design engineering possibilities. So in 3D printing, it is possible to quickly refine designs, which is known as rapid prototyping. So it is the design optimization by which we can create customized products and which also opens the possibility to improve over the previous designs. Another advantage is its low wastage. By 3D printing, it is possible to produce components and parts of any design by utilizing significantly less material than that is used in traditional manufacturing processes, which leads to the lower wastage of materials. Another advantage is localized manufacturing. As 3D printers are movable, they can be localized at any particular site for on-demand production, and this can reduce the logistical burden. For example, armed forces can utilize 3D manufacturing process to create novel material combinations for armor, military clothing, and parts of ammunition. And as this production could be on demand, this would reduce the logistical burden for the transport or shipment of these materials. Another advantage of 3D printing is supply chain resilience. As 3D printing can serve as an alternate source of supply, this can reduce dependence on traditional suppliers, and thus it can boost supply chain resilience. This is particularly important in the case of disasters or other disturbances like war. For example, in the case of disasters, food could be bioprinted, and in the war zones, prosthetic arms, organs for transplants can be bioprinted using 3D printing. Now, owing to their advantages, 3D printing has its applications in various sectors. 3D printing can be used to manufacture and repair spare parts of aircrafts and weapons. It can be also used to print lighter components and parts, which can drastically improve the performance of aerospace and defense systems. They can be also used in automotive and electronic industry to print the parts like engines, interior and exterior parts of luxury vehicles, turbine blades, among others. 3D printing can also be used to create consumer goods and customize products like food items, toys, wearables, jewelry, sports and fitness products. 3D printing can also be used in construction and manufacturing industry like constructing houses. And one of the significant applications of 3D printing is in the healthcare sector, wherein this technology can be used in surgical planning, in creating dental prosthetics, in the creation of patient-specific replicas of bones, organs, and blood vessels. So there is an emerging field called 3D bioprinting, wherein using the human cells as base material, any tissue or organ can be regenerated, and which can be used in creation of functional organs for organ transplantation. Now let us see what are some disadvantages of 3D printing. The first disadvantage is that there are limited materials which can be used in 3D printing. This is because all metals or plastics cannot be temperature controlled enough to allow 3D printing. And many of these 3D printing materials are not recyclable, and a very few are food safe. Another issue is restricted build size. 3D printers currently have small print chambers, which can restrict the size of parts that can be printed. And to print anything bigger, they have to be printed in small parts and then joined together after production. And this can increase the production cost. Another issue is post-processing challenges. So this includes the issues that the final products which we get are not finished. They require finishing and smoothing of the surfaces. So another important issue is copyright issue. As with the help of 3D printing, it is possible to imitate any design and print it, and this could lead to the violation of copyrights. And there is a greater possibility of counterfeit or fake products in the market. And also, the initial cost of installation of 3D printing machines is expensive, and which may be out of the reach for majority of Indian population. Now, apart from disadvantages, there are some challenges in this sector itself. The first challenge is lack of standardization of products. So there is lack of guidelines for fundamental design and standards for manufacturing products, and which could deter the adoption of the technology. For small and medium scale industries, the cost of importing industrial grade printers is too high, as currently there are few 3D printers which are produced domestically. Another issue is inadequate research. Now, due to a lack of centralized approach to additive manufacturing in the past, Indian institutes have refrained from undertaking intense research on additive manufacturing related technologies. Another issue is lack of adoption of this technology in wider scale in India due to the preference for traditional manufacturing processes. And finally, there is a significant risk involved in scaling the 3D printing industry that it can risk employment. Large scale use of additive manufacturing in India may risk the employment of poor assembly workers. Now finally, let us move to the policy measures by the government. So now let us see the policy measures of Government of India. Now since we are studying additive manufacturing under the section of Science and Technology, under Science and Technology section. So we have to limit ourselves to knowing this technology, its applications, advantages and disadvantages. So there is no need to study these policy measures in detail, but you should have a brief idea regarding these policy measures in India. Government of India has launched the National Strategy for Additive Manufacturing 2025 in the year 2022. So the policy aims to increase India's share in global additive manufacturing to 5%. And also, there is a target to add $1 billion to India's GDP by 2025 in this sector. And this would be done by creating an ecosystem of 100 new startups, adding 1 lakh new skilled manpower in this sector, creating 10 additive manufacturing sectors, and 50 India-specific technology in this sector with over 500 products, and also by increasing the awareness of AM products in India. Now let us proceed to our second topic, which is about the recent reforms in the Indian space sector or the commercialization of the sector. As we can see, UPSC has asked questions regarding the space sector in the previous year 2016, 2017 and 2019. In 2016, we found a question on to discuss India's achievements in the field of space science and technology. In 2017, we found this question which was about the success of India in unmanned space missions and need to venture into manned space missions. In the year 2019, we had this question on need to have own space station and how will it benefit India's space program. In order to give boost to the Indian space sector, government has recently done some reforms. So in June 2020, government opened up the space sector to allow the participation of private firms in the entire gamut of space activities. So as a part of these reforms, government set up InSpace, that is Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center. InSpace is an organization inside the Department of Space through which the Indian government will allow private actors to participate in space exploration. So it is an interface between ISRO and non-government and private entities for better utilization of India's space resources. And with the help of InSpace, the existing facilities of ISRO can be utilized by the private firms for ground-based and space-based exploration, and even the technical resources of ISRO and the data collected can be utilized by private firms to increase their participation in the space-related activities in India. And as a part of these reforms, NSIL was formed in 2019. New Space India Limited is the country's first PSU, that is public sector undertaking in the space sector. In the year 2020, the mandate of NSIL was expanded. The major business areas of NSIL includes production of PSLV, Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, and Small Satellite Launch Vehicle, building of satellites, both communication and Earth observation satellites as per the user requirements, and also the transfer of technology developed by ISRO to the private sectors. And as a result of these reforms, just within 3 years, the number of space startups in India has reached about 150. And recently, central government has approved Indian Space Policy 2023, which aims to institutionalize the private sector participation in the space sector, and which will provide ISRO more time to focus on research and development of advanced space technologies. And due to these reforms, in the year 2022, we saw many achievements by the private players in the space sector. For example, Vikram S is the India's first privately developed rocket, which was launched by Skyroot, which is an Indian startup. Another significant achievement is launch of 72 OneWeb satellites to the low Earth orbit by NSIL from India. So OneWeb Satellite is a UK-based company which took the services of satellite launch from India. Agricole Cosmos, which is another startup, established India's first private space vehicle launchpad at Sriharikota. So other achievements include launching Earth observation satellite, nano satellites, and world's first commercial weather sensor. And as we already discussed, the number of space startups in India has reached about 150, and these startups have raised enormous funding. So let us see the global position of India's space sector. Presently, India is the 6th largest player in the industry with around 3.6% of world's space tech companies. The sector is led by US with more than 50% of the share and followed by United Kingdom, Canada, China and Germany. Indian space industry was valued at $7 billion in 2019 and currently It is around $9 billion and it is expected to reach around $13 billion by 2025. And one of the major advantages of India's space industry is its cost effectiveness. Now let us see what is the need to open up space sector for private participation in India. The global space industry is expected to reach over 1 trillion by 2040. And currently, India's share in this industry is less than 3%. So the primary aim is to increase the participation of India in the global space industry. And another important factor is to bridge the demand-supply gap. As we know that the demand for space-based services like satellite data, imagery and space technology is increasing worldwide. And ISRO, without the participation of private companies, is not able to meet this demand. And to incorporate this rising demand, ISRO has to expand nearly 10 times of its current position. So now let us see what is the significance of this public-private partnership in the space sector. With the private partnership, ISRO can reduce the time spent on building satellite and launch vehicles and rather focus this time on research and development of advanced space technologies and space exploration missions. And this will also end ISRO's monopoly in the space sector and enable the sharing of knowledge and technology. And also this will bring in investment and expertise. As we know that space sector is highly competitive, capital intensive and demands high-end technology. And with the participation of private sector, they can bring funds, they can bring investment as well as innovation. This can improve the capacities of ISRO and facilitate cost effectiveness of India's missions. Also, this will have a spillover effect on manufacturing and indigenization of technologies and manufacturing of parts under the Make in India scheme. So for the further development of this sector, there are some challenges which need to be addressed. The first issue is the availability of funds with ISRO. In the budget 2023, ISRO was allocated Rs 12,500 crores. So this is an improvement over the earlier budgets, but the overall funding with ISRO is way less as compared to the funds with space agencies like that of US and China. Also, there is a lack of a dedicated space legislation in India. And in the absence of this space legislation, there is a challenge for private industries to scale up and increase their investments. And as discussed, India has recently approved Indian Space Policy 2023. But this is yet to be presented as a bill and then it would be enacted as an act. And after this act is enacted, then only it can provide a much required clarity in space sector reforms and augment private industry participation. For example, the legislation can have some provisions like insurance cover to the private companies to cover up their losses in case of any failure. And also, the framework would ensure smooth functioning of these interfaces and avoid conflicts between them. So our next article for discussion is based on this particular news article which appeared on Indian Express on 3 April. So the article is about Bedaquiline patent issue. And this patent issue is important under GS paper 3, indigenization of technology and developing new technology, and also under biotechnologies and issues related to intellectual property rights. Now let us understand the context of this news. The Patent Office in India has rejected an application of Johnson & Johnson for a secondary patent on Bedaquiline drug which is used for TB treatment. The application was for a secondary patent. That means Johnson & Johnson already had a patent on this drug, and now since the patent is expiring in July 2023, the company has applied for a secondary patent on the Bedaquiline drug. Now before we get into the details of this article, let us understand Bedaquiline drug in brief. Bedaquiline is a second-line drug in the treatment of tuberculosis. That is, it is used in the treatment of drug-resistant tuberculosis. And since the goal of Government of India is for eradication of TB by 2025, so this drug is essential for Government of India to achieve this goal. Now, Johnson & Johnson had a patent over this drug which is expiring in July 2023. Now the company wanted a patent on the formulation salt of bedaquiline, but the patent office in India has rejected this application under the Section C, Clause D of the Indian Patent Act 1970, citing that this formulation salt fails to qualify as a novelty or a novel innovation. Now we will see these issues of evergreening of patent, and we will see this section of Indian Patent Act. Now let us see the benefit of this move for India. This move will prevent Johnson & Johnson from having the exclusive right for the manufacture of this drug and hence controlling its price. And as a result, compulsory licensing of this drug would be available and the price of this life-saving drug would fall by 80%, and which will improve the affordability of this drug for the poor TB patients. Now let's understand Indian patent regime. So what is a patent? Patent is an exclusive set of rights granted for an invention, which may be either a product or a production process that provides a new way of doing something or a new technical solution to a problem. The legal backing for patents is provided in the Indian Patent Act of 1970. In India, patents are granted if the product or process should be novel, it should have inventive steps, or it must be non-obvious. It should be capable of industrial application, and it should not attract the provisions of Section 3 and 4 of the Patent Act 1970. Patent production to the pharmaceutical products in India was given after the recommendations of a commission chaired by Rajgopala Iyengar, constituted in 1959. And the patent protection of pharmaceuticals were reintroduced after the 2005 amendment of the Indian Patent Act to comply with TRIPS. TRIPS stands for Trade Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights. It is an international legal agreement between the member nations of World Trade Organization. It sets standards for the regulation of intellectual property, and India complies with the major provisions of TRIPS. And now let us talk about Section 3 of Indian Patents Act 1970. Section 3 deals with what does not qualify as an invention under the Patents Act. So under the Section C, Clause D, patent is not provided to a mere discovery of a new form of an already known substance, which does not result in the enhancement of the known efficacy of that substance. And this was the clause under which the secondary patent for bedaquiline was rejected, as the formulation salt of bedaquiline does not qualify for novelty or any new form. Also, a patent is not given to the mere discovery of any new property or new use for a known substance, or the mere use of a known process, machine or apparatus, until such process results in a new product or employs at least one new reactant. So what is the issue of evergreening of patents? So it is a practice of tweaking or slightly modifying drugs in order to extend their patent and thus increase the profits of that company. And what is compulsory licensing? Compulsory licensing is the authorization which is granted by government to someone else or a third party to produce a patented product or process without the consent of the patent owner. And this is generally done when the patent owner is taking undue advantage of the exclusive right granted by the patent. And the provision of compulsory licensing can also be used in case of a national emergency or extreme urgency, or in the cases of public non-commercial use. And compulsory licensing is recognized or one of the flexibilities in the TRIPS agreement of World Trade Organization. So the next article for today is based on this particular news which appeared on today's Hindu edition. The context is that the Ministry of Information and Technology has amended the Information Technology Rules 2021 related to intermediary guidelines and digital media ethics code. The latest amendment empowers the Union government to designate an official fact checker for misinformation and fake news, and to regulate the online real money gaming industry, which comprises apps like fantasy sports sites, rummy and poker. Now for our UPSC mains examination, this is relevant Under GS Paper 2, Government Policies and Interventions for Development in Various Sectors. And this is also important under GS Paper 3, Challenges to Internal Security through Communication Networks, Role of Media and Social Networking Sites in Internal Security Challenges. Now in this article, we will discuss what is fake news, what is the government's stance on fake news, and what are these latest amendments and the concerns with these moves, and finally the impact of these amendments on gambling. Now starting with fake news, these are the news or stories on internet that are not true, and there can be two kinds of fake news. Number one, false stories that are deliberately published in order to make people believe in some untrue incident or get traffic to a website. And in another case, they may be stories that may have half truth, but they are not completely accurate. So globally and India, there are some sites which do fact checking or they expose fake news. Like in India, there is alt news. So we can see some examples of fake news like UNESCO has declared Jan Gan Man as the best national anthem, and sometimes these news may be spread for some malicious purposes like to influence the election results or to fuel communal riots. Now let us see what is the status of regulation of fake news in India. As of now, there is no specific rule in India to curb fake news, as freedom of expression in India is a fundamental right under Article 19. However, the Press Council of India can warn or censure the print media or news agency. But in the case of fake news in social media, the Press Council of India does not have this power. Also, the Indian Broadcast Foundation can investigate the content on the television channels, but this is not true in the case of social media. Also, there are some legal means in India like Section 499 of Indian Penal Code deals with defamation and 500 deals with punishment regarding defamation. Section 153 of IPC deals with giving provocation with intent to cause riot. Section 295 deals with injuring or defiling a place of worship with an intent to insult the religion of any class. So these provisions may relate to the consequences of fake news, but they are not sufficient to arrest the spread of fake news in India. Now let us talk about Information Technology, Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code Rules 2021. So these rules were issued under the Information Technology Act 2000 for social media platforms, OTT players and digital media. So let us see some important provisions of these rules. These rules made a distinction between significant social media intermediary and regular social media intermediary. So significant social media intermediaries were those which had registered users in India above a notified threshold or above 50 lakhs in India. And owing to a large user base, these social media intermediaries were required to observe certain additional diligence, such as tracking or identification of the first originator of the information, regulation of content, that is removal or disabling of access to the content with nudity, morphed images or impersonation. They have to provide grievance redressal mechanism for resolving complaints from users or victims and appoint a grievance officer to resolve complaints in 15 days. And the rules say that these intermediaries may lose immunity or safe harbor from legal hurdles if they do not have a grievance officer for India or do not address the user complaints on time. Now let us see the meaning of safe harbor. Safe harbor is a principle that allows the social media platforms to avoid liability for any post made by the users. Now let us see what are the latest amendments. So as per the latest amendments, Press Information Bureau or PIB will continue to be an official fact checker. And the most significant amendment is that these significant social media intermediaries will lose their safe harbor or immunity from legal hurdles if any news is flagged as fake by the government or PIB fact checker. Editors Guild of India and Internet Freedom Foundation have raised issues over these amendments, calling them akin to censorship and legally contentious. Now let us see what these amendments say about real money online games. Real money gaming services have to get themselves certified as permissible by a self-regulatory body consisting of experts and industry members. And this self-regulatory body will decide whether the game is skill-led or chance-led. The games which will be determined as skill-led will not be regulated, but the games which will be certified as chance-led, they can be regulated. So what is the potential issue here? As the sector of gambling and battling is under the state's jurisdiction, and now these IT acts are under the central government which is framing these regulations. Now this can account for federal conflicts, that is the conflict between center and state regarding the regulations on gambling and betting.